What's up, peeps? Hope everybody is having a phenomenal week so far, and I bet you guys look super handsome today. So once again, thank you very much for joining me here on the Daily Peels video stream of the day. My name is David. It is currently 8:41 p.m. on this beautiful Tuesday, May 14, 2024. Shout out to my boy Connor, it's his birthday. And also shout out to the Boston Bruins, currently winning 2-1, but they are down in the series 3-1. So if this doesn't work out, I mean, that's basically going to be it. And my mental health on a day-to-day basis is going to be determined by this man right here, even more so than it already is. But shout out to Jason Tatum and the Boston Celtics for stealing 2 games out in Cleveland. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the stuff that you guys are here for, and that is markets. We're going to be getting everybody ready for the ticker tape on Wednesday, May 15th, excuse me. A big CPI report coming out this morning. We got a big PPI report that we'll dive into in just a quick second. We also got some major news out of OpenAI. I mean, on both sides of the Daily Peel today, both in the banana bits as well as in the thought banana section. So we'll dive into all of that. And of course, we'll talk about some of our favorite stock movers of the day. Before that, let's talk about the WSL portfolio. Once again, we are back on top, at least compared to the S&P 500. We rose about 53 basis points on the day yesterday. The NASDAQ was closer to about 80 basis points, whereas the S&P was just over 40 basis points. So we'll take the dub, underperforming the NASDAQ and still the S&P 500 for the year. I mean, at this point, you guys would be doing a way better job if you followed my sports betting picks. I mean, Boston Celtics, anybody? At least I know that I have something that I could lateral into once Patrick inevitably fires me at some point, because I'm sure it'll be something I say here or in the Daily Peel. But anyway, it's good to know that I have career prospects going forward. Make sure to stick with me for all my sports betting locks. Anyway, let's go ahead and move into some of the banana bits of the day. Like I said, I do have some news about OpenAI, but we'll get into that in just a quick second, because first and foremost, we got to talk about Mr. Jerome Powell. He was out there yapping on Tuesday, as he always does, and he was basically staying cool, calm and collected. The guy is really never cool, to be quite honest with you. As Federal Reserve Chair, I think cool is kind of like the last qualification that you could have. We'll save that for fucking Drake and Kendrick, although both of them seem like fucking losers right now. Anyway, J-Pow, he was calm and collected yesterday when talking about inflation. We got an uptick in the PPI report that we'll dive into in just a quick minute. But heading into tomorrow's CPI report, or I guess today's CPI report for when you're probably watching this, he is keeping a very level head. He's not intimidated just yet. And thank God I'm not the Fed chair, because I would have hiked rates up to 10% already at this point. So we're very glad to see that he has control over his emotions. Anyway, the race for chip supremacy, it's getting big, it's getting intense. The United States and a lot of Western countries are starting to size up to China, effectively. It's kind of like a 20v1 in the chips race. It's China versus everybody. And honestly, I like an underdog story. You know, don't get me wrong, I like America more than I like underdogs. But still, I mean, they could make a movie about this, and I would be rooting for China the entire way. But it seems like the battle for chip supremacy is starting to flatten a little bit, and it's not going to be entirely concentrated in Taiwan and in China. Anyway, getting into the OpenAI stuff, one man, 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔 CEO is obviously number one. 𝗪𝗲𝗡 is up there too. She's the chief technology officer, and she's the one that got caught lacking in that interview a couple weeks ago when somebody was asking her if they used YouTube videos to train Sora AI. I don't know how she didn't practice that question or rehearse it beforehand. Bad PR team on her part. So besides those two, Ilya is definitely the third. He might be the second guy. I don't know how it works internally there. I'm not damn Kara Swisher. I'm not that plugged in, okay? Try my best, but Jesus. Ilya was the one, however, back in November who kind of like flipped on Sam, I guess. A lot of reports are saying that he turned on him and he was kind of the final vote in sending Sam out the door. He has finally left OpenAI. So he did post on X and say that like he's super excited for his new venture, blah, blah, blah. My money is that he's joining XAI. Personally, I bet he's going over with Team Elon because I'm pretty sure that's what brought him into OpenAI back in the day anyway. But pretty sure he's also boys with Lex Friedman and people like that too, and they all fucking ride Elon like nobody's business. So do I. I mean, I can't really judge too much. But anyway, it's going to be interesting to see what he does going forward. He's one of the AI geniuses in the world. Shout out to Ilya ditching OpenAI, aka closed AI, as a lot of VCs like to call it. Now, finally, there was an interesting report from the Financial Stability Oversight Committee that dropped recently. Now, I linked to the report itself. Don't read it. It is an absolute monstrosity to the eyes. It's like way too long. Obviously, it's all legal and kind of governmental jargon, but basically they are making some of these mortgage lenders here in the United States too big to fail. And so it's dangerous territory to be putting something in that league. Obviously, I don't need to explain that too much, but this is definitely kind of an underreported story that you're going to want to follow going forward, especially if you want to purchase a house this year or in the next decade. So definitely some good stuff to be keeping track of. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into PPI, or as I like to call it, PP Cry. And that's because we saw the single largest year-over-year gain in the PPI in over a year, or in exactly a year, today. So that dropped in the Producer Price Index report. To take a step back for a quick second, the PPI, like I just said, this is the Producer's Price Index report dropped by the Bureau of Labor Statistics each month, usually either a day prior or a day following the CPI report. This month we got that a day prior to the CPI report, which is always great, because the PPI, this is measuring the cost of inputs for producers in the U.S. economy. It used to just be manufacturers, now it includes service-oriented companies as well. So this is one of those things that can kind of give us a sense of where inflation might be heading. Now, specifically, it's going to give us an idea of where inflation is heading on the CPI side of things. Fed doesn't really care about that. They care about the PCE. That's really it. Because the baskets are so different, it's like comparing apples to fucking that green screen that I have sitting over there. Like, it's not really similar at all, at least once you get into, like, technical economic detail. It's all inflation, but still, you know, I don't want to nerd out too much on you guys. But the PPI report, let's go ahead and dive into the numbers. So, on a monthly basis, the Producer Price Index increased 0.5% during the month of April. That was yet another uptick from previous months, but it's not necessarily setting new records or anything in over a year. That's below the 0.6% that we saw in August of 2023. But when we expand this to the annual side of things, it rose 2.2%, which is the highest that we've seen since April of 2023. Now, on the core side, we're also setting brand new records. So, core inflation for the month was 0.4%. This doubled expectations for a 0.2% rise. Obviously not exactly what we want to see. And it came in at 3.1% on the annual side of things. So that's the highest since August of 2022. So we're getting pretty high in that side of things. It's a little bit into that kind of territory where we maybe should start to worry a little bit. But before we worry, let's go ahead and dive a little bit more into the numbers here, because really, with most of these reports, it's kind of like one or two things that are going to be driving the uptick in inflation. Here, in this case, it was largely gasoline prices, but when we kind of dove in a little bit further, we noticed that it was really something going on a little bit behind the scenes here. So if you actually scroll past the first and second page in the PPI report, which I don't think any other financial journalist in the entire world does, so you guys are, I mean, I don't want to, you know, suck my own dick here too badly or toot my own horn. I probably should say to keep it PG-13, but if actually reading into this report, it kind of revealed some interesting stuff. So most of the increases here could be found in what's called stage 2 of the production chain, or stage 2 of intermediate demand. So the way that they calculate this in the PPI is they assess the U.S. economy in essentially 4 stages of the supply chain, where stage 1 is like raw materials. This is like people, it would be like those cobalt mines that they send the kids down in to get the Tesla batteries and shit like that. Like, this is the front of the line. It's people out there, like, whatever they do, like harvesting crops. I think I don't know anything besides, I don't know anything about the real world, to be quite honest with you, but it's where they're like pulling the raw materials out. Stage 2 is where they're kind of starting to use those raw materials a little bit, still called unprocessed goods at this point for the most part. So think of things like crude oil. That's kind of like what we're talking about when we talk about stage 2 intermediate demand. This is where we saw the vast majority of the increase in inflation, in PPI inflation for final demand goods. And it got a little bit scarier because most of the gain in that stage 2 intermediate was from unprocessed goods, meaning that inflation is buried deep within the supply chain. So this, you know, it doesn't really tell us anything about the underlying causes that are going to be driving inflation. We already know what those are. It's wage pressures and it's the money supply. This is where the money supply aspect of it might be manifesting itself and pushing those costs higher, because effectively what this does is the further down the supply chain you go, like the further away from consumers that inflation is starting, the higher that inflation is going to be once it eventually gets to the consumer, because at every stage of the production chain, they're going to be adding on their own costs and their own margin and their own inflationary margin from there. So not a great sign for the CPI report, but again, this is just 1 month's data. And if we actually look at the PPI report overall, nearly 3/4 of the uptick in headline PPI. So nearly 3/4 of that 0.5% monthly gain was attributable to a 0.6% monthly gain from final demand services. We all know the U.S. economy, vast majority is done by services. It's like 70% or so is service oriented. So, that is where most of these gains are still coming. Obviously, most of that is going to be from wage pressures. That's the biggest cost in the services side of the U.S. economy, and that's driving most of inflation. So a lot of this is still mostly attributable to the labor market, but we're going to want to be watching the supply chain, because this was an anomaly in the data. This is not how the past couple of months of PPI reports have been looking when it comes to stage 2 of the intermediate demand curve, or of the intermediate demand cycle. So that's something we're definitely going to want to keep our eyes on. Markets kind of shrugged it off. They didn't really care too much. Nothing really changed in terms of rate expectations going forward, largely because J-Powell came out at like 10 a.m., 10:45 a.m. and started his yap and saying that he was expecting things to, well, basically when he was remaining all cool, calm, and collected. That about does it for the PPI report. Let's go ahead and get into some of these stock movers. So we have Plug Power, and I gotta say, not dying is always a positive thing. That might sound like a very basic statement, but that is the reality for Plug Power shareholders. Yesterday, this company, they basically came out with an announcement that, hey, we're probably going to survive, or at least for another year or two or so, because this company managed to secure $1.66 billion in contingent financing from the Department of Energy, basically the DOE. They are doling out this cash as they kind of reach certain milestones along the way in order to continue the production of 6 green hydrogen production facilities across the United States. Obviously, we love to see that, green production facilities. Jesus Christ, that Slack notification is like a gunshot to the head. Let me go ahead and mute my computer here so that doesn't happen again, and I don't get PTSD. Anyway, like I said, the DOE, they're going to be allowing Plug Power to stay alive effectively, so the stock was up 19% on the day. Good for them. Shout out to any shareholders. I don't know how you're dumb enough to still be holding that thing after the volatility over the past couple of years, but clearly you must just be addicted to the ride and the thrill of the game. So honestly, I can respect that and I completely support it. Maybe I'll fucking buy some shares myself. Just kidding, I don't hate myself that much. Anyway, moving on into our second stock mover of the day, we have On Holdings. So this is On Running, as most consumers know it. Swiss company, or I think it's a Swiss company. It might be Swedish. I get those confused way too often. But Nike is shaking in their Air Force Ones right now. They are very concerned. Normally Air Force Ones are associated with being like the tough guy. Not today. That's On Holdings right now because this company is coming for Nike's throne. They came out and the CEO explicitly stated in their earnings report that their goal is to become the most premium global sportswear brand. No other qualifications, no other contributing factors. They're trying to dethrone Nike as the world's premium. Is that what they said? The most premium global sportswear brand. They are completely coming for that title. So, Nike's probably a little bit scared. We're well on their way to that title in the last quarter as well because sales jumped about 21%, beating expectations for the quarter. They doubled non-GAAP earnings, aka bullshit earnings, but still seeing that double made the market absolutely freak out. Guidance of 30% sales growth for the year was very positive. It wasn't raised at all. It was basically just maintained. What this is suggesting is that, who knew? Wealthy consumers still have money because this company, they mark up their shoes like nobody's fucking business. So if you're ever looking to wildly overpay for a basic pair of running shoes that you could probably get at something like a goddamn TJ Maxx down the street, go ahead and check out On Holdings. I mean, maybe check out their stock too because it was up 18.3% on the day yesterday. Moving on into the What's Raw names, I'll give $1 million to anybody out there that knows this company besides me. It is StoneCo Limited. This is a Brazilian payments firm. It's kind of like Toast plus Square meets one, but based in Brazil. This is like a $5-10 billion market cap. They had a very mixed quarter. Either way, the market absolutely threw up in response to their results for the first quarter. Big swing and a miss on the revenue side, coming in at $623 million versus $633 million that was expected. They did manage to beat on earnings at 29 cents a share versus the 28 cents a share that was expected. Both deposits in their merchant base grew very strongly for the quarter, so fundamentally it was going pretty well. Monetization looking pretty weak for the quarter. It could be something cyclical, could be something to do with Brazil. There was a lot of currency conversion problems that the company was facing, especially given the weakening of things like the Brazilian real versus the US dollar. So a lot of that is kind of being factored in as well. Stock was up 8.1% for the session. All right, finally, we have Alibaba Group. Jesus, this company, I mean, I've never seen a company get so brutalized. And I don't mean the stock, I mean the actual fundamental result of this company. So we all know one of the CCP's favorite activities is to disappear people, especially Alibaba co-founder Jack Ma. He's been disappeared more times than anybody can count just about, but Alibaba decided to pursue that same strategy of disappearing and apply it to their profits and made them go away about 96% for the quarter. So net income, GAAP net income we're talking about here, was down 96% compared to the first quarter of last year, almost entirely attributable to investment losses, basically losses that they earned on their investment portfolio. And although even if they're unrealized, they do still have to charge these for GAAP rules, gets added back in the cash flow statement. So, don't freak out about it just yet. But still, this is absolutely disgusting to see. Now, they managed to beat estimates on revenue, but it only grew 4% for the year. Very slow for Alibaba. This is basically the Amazon of China. So to only be growing, imagine if Amazon grew its revenue 4%. I think that the United States would be having a civil war, quite honestly. So seeing Alibaba do this, there's a little bit more justification for it because they're getting a lot of low-cost competition from PDD Holdings and specifically their own app called Temu, which is just as shitty as like Shein and like TikTok Shop and like all that other garbage that we order from across the entire world and somehow shows up on our doorstep 2 days later. So it's very similar to that, but the biggest thing here is the Chinese consumer. So over the past couple of years, we know the Chinese consumer has been weakening just a little bit, especially due to a dramatic rise in youth unemployment. And youths are obviously most of the people who are going to be digitally native enough to know how to use Alibaba. And so a lot of this was driving that underperformance. So despite the fact that net income fell just a little, 96%, the stock was only down about 6% on the day. All right. Let's go ahead and move into our last update of the day. And we have Open Update, or specifically OpenAI Update. So the company earlier this week, they had their spring announcement or their spring update, whatever the fuck you want to call it. I mean, they dramatized everything over there. And effectively what they did was make ChatGPT-4 a hell of a lot better. So some background. Everybody has been waiting on their hands, feet, knees, elbows, whatever the fuck else body parts you have. Everybody has been waiting on these things, waiting for ChatGPT-5. Specifically myself, I use a betting app called 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗪, and I actually have money on ChatGPT-5 getting released before the end of 2024. That didn't happen yesterday, but my odds did change dramatically because OpenAI came out with ChatGPT-4o, or more specifically, ChatGPT-4 Omni is what it actually stands for. This is not a new model. It's an enhancement on the existing ChatGPT-4 model, and it's both pretty cool and not really anything different at all at the same time. So this was an interesting one to learn about. Now, first and foremost, props to the team over there at OpenAI because they've made the best LLM on the market right now. It's better than the second best LLM, which is ChatGPT Turbo, or ChatGPT-4 Turbo. It's better than the third best LLM, which is ChatGPT-4, and the fourth best LLM, which from this chart seems to be Meta's Llama 3, which kind of makes sense because Llama 3, it just seems like it would be a lot more native to like social conversations, given the training data available on Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, all that other bullshit that Facebook uses to steal your data. So very impressive model in this sense, and specifically it does a really, really good job in recognizing visual and audio cues. So they've drastically improved this thing's ability to like recognize videos. Somebody even posted a video on X, I think his name is Min Choi. He's like my boy Rowan Chang. He, publishes a bunch of information about artificial intelligence. He posted a video of this dude, and he was standing at like a pond, and he was holding a camera like this. He looked like an absolute pervert, to be quite honest. But thankfully, he was just filming ducks, and he was saying to the camera, like, tell me what the ducks are doing, as if they weren't just fucking swimming around in the water right in front of him. And the AI model was able to say, like, oh, the ducks are just fucking vibing, dude. Like, they're just kind of hanging out right there. It actually gave, like, a workable response. So it's a pretty cool use case. The only thing is that you do have to take birth control in the form of holding your camera like this. Nobody's ever going to want to have sex with you if you're out there doing that, especially in an international location on a vacation or something like that, and you're wondering what, like, a building is. We need AirPods or something in our ears with the camera to do this so that we don't look like complete and total version losers while we're using this artificial intelligence. But there was a lot more going on under the surface besides just that. So this thing's, like 4O's ability to recognize input, specifically visual input going into the model, improved dramatically. There's a lot of examples published on the website as well. I included a couple in the piece here too. It was really cool. It was a bunch of good examples. They've really increased the performance here. They've added some capabilities like summarizing meeting notes. You can upload a video and say, like, give me a summary of this thing. So no student is ever going to pay attention in class ever again, if we were even considering that might still be a possibility going forward, because this will just send them an email summary of exactly what was covered during class for that session. So hopefully it makes your job of securing a role in IB a little bit easier, because, the competition is going to be a hell of a lot worse. But, the biggest thing, my big takeaway from this was, it's a lot of cool stuff. It's a lot of great improvements and stuff that they're kind of adding together under one roof, but it's nothing new whatsoever. So other artificial intelligence companies have already been doing this stuff. Half of you guys that join my meetings are using an Otter AI because nobody wants to listen to me anyway. So you are coming in there and you're getting this meeting summarized and sent to you afterwards. So there was a lot of those new additions that are already available on the artificial intelligence market. OpenAI basically just kind of took them, housed them under, one domain. The biggest thing, so in summary, really cool updates, very, impressive performance across a lot of these different ranges of evaluation. But the test that I always use if something is like a breakthrough or like a groundbreaker, or the specific language I used in the piece was a game-changing technology, is what I like to call the mom and dad test. So whenever something like this comes around and I'm like, wow, that seems pretty sick, I always think, would my mom use this? Would my dad use this? Are they going to find this useful? Because they're normal human beings, believe it or not, those actually still exist. They don't need to nerd out on technology in order to enjoy their day-to-day lives, which absolutely amazes me, to be honest, but still. And in kind of thinking about it, you know, my mom's a teacher. She teaches in an area where there's a lot of parents that speak different languages, so this could be a particularly useful tool for something like that, like real-time audio translation. That's pretty fucking sick, but beyond that, not a whole lot of use cases. My dad, I'm pretty sure he still has an iPhone that has a fucking home button on it, and I'm pretty sure it has more wood chips than it does a phone case on it nowadays. But either way, these guys, they're not going to be jumping on this anytime soon. Now, if it was really good enough, they certainly would be using it. Like my mom, for example, does use ChatGPT, but she uses it to like ask questions a couple of times a week. Like it's nothing major, or to like formalize things into one place, or whatever the hell she does in her day-to-day life. So it's not something that the average person is going to find a whole lot of use out of, or a whole lot of new use cases, I probably should say. But now, if you're a tech nerd, you certainly could figure out how to plug in APIs to this thing and get it all running nice and dandy so it's like your own personal assistant or your own personal Jarvis. You could do that now because it is finally up to that point of real-time translation, or just about real-time translation, like it's right at the cusp of that. But still, not a big game changer. I am not impressed. I'm waiting for ChatGPT 5. Well, I shouldn't say I'm not impressed. I definitely am impressed, especially because the quote of the day comes from none other than ChatGPT 4.0. So basically what I did, I was kind of playing around with its creative skills a little bit, and I figured might as well use it to check something off the to-do list instead of just fucking around. And so I said to it, come up with an original quote about investing. And so we ran through a couple of examples. It took about 5 tries before I got one that was good enough to share with you guys in Appeal. And it said, investing is the art of turning uncertainty into opportunity. Something tells me that ChatGPT didn't just come up with that, and that something definitely said it. But it then followed along and said, those who succeed are not the ones who avoid risk, but those who manage it wisely and stay committed to their long-term goals. So there's some investing advice from ChatGPT right there. You certainly won't be getting any from me here today. I'm going to go ahead and shut up because this is already too long as it is. Thank you guys for tuning in, as always. Love you, apes. It is now 9:03 p.m., so it's way past my bedtime. I will see you guys tomorrow. Happy investing, happy trading. Best of luck with finals if you're still taking them. And like I said, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye now.